A stray dog collapsed outside a clinic. But when the vet opened her mouth and spotted a hidden metal device, he froze. It wasn't an injury, it was something terrifying. What happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. The phone buzzed, forgotten in Dr. Matthew Carter's pocket as he crossed the icy parking lot, boots slipping slightly on the wet asphalt. The late autumn air gnawed at his skin, and the wind howled low between the cars, a bitter whisper of coming storms. He tucked his chin into the collar of his scrubs jacket, his mind a blur of cases waiting inside, until he caught sight of movement from the corner of his eye. A German shepherd mix, gaunt beyond belief, staggered toward the clinic entrance. Her golden brown fur, once lush, now hung in muddy, blood-streaked clumps along her emaciated frame. Every bone jutted cruelly against her skin. She limped a few more paces, legs trembling violently, then crumpled with a soft, sickening thud onto the pavement. Matthew sprinted without thinking, the crunch of his boots deafening against the cold silence. As he dropped to his knees beside her, the dog lifted her head weakly, eyes locking onto his, fevered, glassy, but burning with a fierce, defiant will to live. Her chest fluttered in shallow, rattling breaths. Cradling her carefully, Matthew felt how frighteningly light she was, her ribs sharp under his hands. The rain picked up, needling down in stinging sheets as he bolted back toward the clinic. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, too bright, too harsh. Claire Evans, his lead technician, looked up from paperwork, her dark-rimmed glasses slipping down her nose. The instant she saw them, the blood drained from her face. She dropped everything and rushed forward, grabbing towels, prepping fluids. Matthew laid the dog onto the metal exam table. The surface was cold, but she barely flinched, too far gone even to shiver properly. Her tongue lolled from her mouth, dry and cracked, her heartbeat thready under trembling fingers. Matthew's voice cut through the chaos, low and firm. "Claire, oxygen, now." The dog blinked slowly, the simple act costing her visible effort. Matthew bent close, whispering, "Stay with me, girl. Just stay." His hands moved on instinct, checking vitals, starting an IV, scanning for obvious injuries. But even as he worked, a gnawing sense of wrongness grew inside him. Something wasn't adding up. This wasn't just neglect. This wasn't just exposure. When he gently tilted her jaw open to check for dental trauma, he froze. His breath caught halfway up his throat. Claire, moving beside him, caught the sudden change in his expression and stiffened. "What is it?" she whispered. But Matthew couldn't speak yet, because inside the dog's mouth, hidden behind swollen gums and broken teeth, was something gleaming, something that had no business being there, something that changed everything. The clinic air felt heavier now, pressing down like a hand on Matthew's back as he worked. The dog's breathing remained shallow but steadier under the flow of oxygen, her chest rising and falling in a stuttering rhythm that matched the frantic pulse in his own ears. Every beep of the monitor was a countdown, each second snatched from the jaws of something unseen and monstrous. Claire, her face pale but set in hard lines of focus, moved with brisk, deliberate precision. She handed him the instruments without a word, her fingers trembling only slightly. Together they created a bubble of desperate calm in the chaos, anchored by the fragile life stretched out between them. Matthew's gloved fingers moved carefully, parting the dog's torn gums again, navigating past bruised tissue and fractured teeth. And there, lodged deep, hidden where no one should have ever looked, something metallic gleamed, catching the surgical light. He stiffened. For a long moment he just stared, mind refusing to fit the pieces together. Claire, hovering just over his shoulder, sucked in a sharp breath. "Is that a wire?" Not a wire. Not just a wire. Matthew leaned closer, his stomach knotting tighter with every heartbeat. Embedded in the soft tissue at the back of the dog's throat was a small, cylindrical device, gleaming steel casing, no larger than a grain of rice but humming with significance. He had seen enough working with local shelters, rescue units, even the occasional police K-9. This wasn't a standard ID chip. It was different. Wrong. A military-grade tracker, a type only whispered about, rumored to be used for surveillance animals, espionage projects, things the public wasn't supposed to know. A chill raced down Matthew's spine. This stray, half-dead, battered, anonymous, wasn't just abandoned. She had been discarded, erased, and someone, somewhere, had once gone to great lengths to keep tabs on her. The realization brought a new urgency flooding through Matthew's veins. He needed to get the tracker out, but he also needed to keep her alive long enough to understand why it had been there in the first place. Claire's wide brown eyes met his across the table. "What do we do?" Matthew's voice was low, determined. "We save her." The questions, the fear, the shock, they could wait. First, they had to pull her back from the edge, because the secrets buried in her broken body were only just beginning to surface. The first black SUV rolled past the clinic just after dusk. Slow, deliberate, windows so dark that the interior was a mystery. Matthew caught it from the corner of his eye as he double-checked the locks on the front door. His gut clenched. It wasn't paranoia. It was instinct. The kind that had kept him alive overseas in places where mistakes were fatal. Inside the clinic, the lights were dimmed to slivers. Claire, wearing the same navy scrubs and fatigue etched deep under her eyes, slept curled on a worn cot near the surgical bay, one hand resting protectively on the edge of Hope's kennel. The dog, thinner still but no longer trembling, pressed herself against the bars when Matthew passed, her golden brown gaze following his every move. Hope's breathing had steadied. Her ribs no longer heaved with each intake. But she was still fragile, still fighting battles none of them could see. Matthew moved quietly through the darkened halls, his mud-streaked boots muffled against the linoleum. His hands itched with a restless, furious energy. His mind played the possibilities on an endless loop. Hope wasn't just an abandoned stray. She was evidence. Of what, he wasn't sure yet. But the wrong kind of people wanted her back. He had made a few discreet calls earlier to friends from his Army medic days. People who didn't ask questions they didn't want answers to. The replies came fast and cautious. Military-grade bio-tracking tech. Top-secret field programs. Projects that didn't officially exist. By the time the second SUV parked across the street, headlights off, Matthew knew he had crossed a line he couldn't uncross. They weren't going to ask nicely again. They were going to take. But they had underestimated two things. First, Matthew wasn't alone. And second, he had already made his decision. Hope had survived unimaginable cruelty. She had stumbled, starving and broken, into his hands. And now she was here, in the only place she had ever been safe. She leaned against the kennel's door, trusting him with a trust so raw it cut deeper than any scar. Matthew crouched in front of her, his sandy blonde hair shadowing his eyes, his hand slipping through the bars to stroke her gently. "They're not getting you," he whispered. His voice was low, steady. A promise hammered into every word. Outside, another engine purred low into the night. Inside, the clinic felt like a heartbeat waiting to break into a sprint, and Matthew was ready. Weeks later, the world knew her name. Hope's photo, skinny frame curled protectively beside Matthew's boots, her soft brown eyes luminous with trust, blazed across newspapers and news feeds. The leak had been small at first, a whisper on an anonymous forum. But outrage was gasoline waiting for a match. Investigative reporters unearthed what Matthew had feared: clandestine experiments targeting the most invisible victims. Stray animals, discarded like trash, weaponized without consent. Public fury thundered louder than any threat. Hearings were called. Secret programs were dragged into the harsh light of day and dismantled, piece by piece. Officials stammered. Apologies rained down, too late and too hollow. But it didn't matter to Matthew. Justice, slow and imperfect, had finally moved. Inside the Crescent Ridge Veterinary Clinic, life shifted too. On a crisp Saturday morning, under a sky so blue it hurt to look at, Matthew signed the adoption papers. His hand trembled slightly, not from nerves, but from the sheer, overwhelming weight of what it meant. Claire stood nearby, grinning wide, her dark-rimmed glasses slipping down her nose as she snapped photos on her battered old camera. Hope, no longer frail, her golden-brown coat gleaming under months of careful healing, sat proudly beside him, a blue collar around her neck with a simple silver tag: Hope Carter. When the final signature dried, Hope leaned into Matthew's side, her nose bumping his ribs as if to say, "We made it." Later that afternoon, the clinic's backyard bloomed with life. Children from the town, some who had sent crayon drawings and cards to Hope the Brave Dog, chased butterflies. Lily, Matthew's 6-year-old niece with wild curls and an even wilder laugh, tore across the grass, Hope bounding after her with clumsy, joyous leaps. Matthew stood back, arms crossed loosely over his chest, mud-streaked boots rooted to the earth. The golden light bathed the scene, painting everything in a soft, forgiving glow. He felt it then, something he hadn't known he was missing. Not just pride, not just peace, but belonging. Hope hadn't merely needed saving. She had shattered the walls Matthew hadn't even realized he had built, brick by silent brick. After years of watching the world break promises and abandon the helpless, she had shown him that some souls, no matter how battered, carried fire that no cruelty could extinguish, and now, standing on the other side of fear and anger, they were free, together. For the first time in a long time, Matthew smiled without reservation. Hope, spotting him from across the lawn, barked once, a bright, unstoppable sound, and sprinted back to him like she was running home. Because she was. And so was he.